This is Steve Laffey's Fixing America. And now, broadcasting live from the Fixing America Command Center in Fort Collins, Colorado, here is your host, Steve Laffey.
Hey, Steve Laffey here today. We started, hopefully you're there listening. We're starting a couple 30 seconds early, I think. And we've got a great show for you today. We enjoyed yesterday's show a lot. We worked through some of the some glitches that I caused, even though we practiced. But when you do it live, some things happen here. It's Steve Laffey here. Steve Laffey's Fixing America. Like us on Facebook. We're LaffeyRadio.com. On Facebook, we're Laffey Radio. Follow us on Twitter. And people are starting to follow us on Twitter. We put out a good blog last night. We're going to be putting up some Laffey Minutes. We've got these Laffey Minutes. They're about a minute long. And we're going to be putting them out 5 days a week for you. We want you to share them with people. We're here to fix America. We believe, our small team believes, that the national media, whatever you want to call it, people aren't focused on problems. And if they want to do half hour on one of the shows about some guy named Chris Brown assaulting somebody else, they can. We're not doing that. We've got to put information in your hand with solutions so you can walk away from the show and then go to Fixing America Presents. You can go there in a minute and a half. There's one online right now. We'll be putting up another one later on this week, but you'll find out something about banks. You know, you'll have some information and some weapons to use. Not Republican versus Democrat, not, them versus us, not conservative, liberal, just information about us versus them, which is what it's come down to. A nation that crossed to $17 trillion. It's really us versus them. And our elected officials are not doing their job. And today, you're on the ground floor. This is day number 2. You're on the ground floor of LaffeyRadio.com. And we think this is just going to build. We want you to build it with us. We want you to spread it around, get people to watch the show. And by the way, you can watch it on demand. When this show's over and you say, hey, I enjoyed the show, and you say it to a friend, tell them to go on and just watch it tonight. Watch it at 9 o'clock. Watch it at 10 o'clock. Watch it. I was up at 2:30 this morning. I couldn't sleep. But what started to happen to me, instead of taking care of cows and horses and sleeping a little bit longer, at 2:30 this morning, my brain was like, oh, I got to balance the budget. And I was looking at, that's what we're doing the show. We're gonna do a show today, and it might be a little depressing. We're not doing a show that this is how other people are talking about the budget. This is a show today about the United States budget, which is running this year. It looks like $750 billion deficit, and the national debt is above $17 trillion, and its public debt has got to be north of $13 trillion, the stuff that we really borrow with, and we're close to that $20 trillion, which most people think is where we can't take it any longer. And so the purpose of this show today is to put it out in front of you, and we said we're going to do it on a napkin. It really took 2 sides of a piece of paper to really put it out there. And I write big is why. I guess I could have got it on a napkin if I'd put it really small, but we got to get it out there so you understand it. And so we all can look at it and go, And what I'd say when I did this morning at about 2:30 again and get the data together is that, wow. I understand why politicians don't want to tell you this. It's their duty to. It's a duty of the president to introduce a balanced budget. And if the Congress doesn't want to do it and so forth, that's a whole different deal. But it's a duty, it just never gets done. Hadn't been done since, well, if you don't include the fact that we're stealing from Social Security, it hasn't been done in 50 years probably. But I guess in the 90s under Clinton, they did balance the budget. And so we've got to talk about department by department how we would do this. So let me set the stage for you. We've got a situation where we are going to spend about $3 trillion next year. That's a 3 with 12 zeros. And we're going to spend 3.7 trillion. I'm sorry, 3.75 trillion. We're going to take in about 3 trillion. We take it mostly through income taxes, Social Security taxes. There is no lockbox for Social Security. It just goes into the general fund. I don't care what anybody says about it. It's not safe for you because it's in the general fund. And we got to have a show about how we're going to change the whole system. But that's not today. Today is to look at each department, go over it line item by line item, so that we can actually look each other in the eye. And I'm looking out there at you and saying, this is what would have to happen. Roughly speaking, we can argue over 10 billion here or 20 billion here and so forth. But this is what would have to happen. And when you see it all spelled out for you, it's sort of devastating. But we can have a positive attitude about it. We can say this is what has to be done. We can work on it. And of course, we're in a situation where our politicians do the opposite of this show. What they do is they take out and go out to Iowa and run for president and say, we're never going to touch those farm subsidies. Oh, of course not. Never going to touch those agricultural subsidies. Say the same thing in Florida, by the way. No matter how much pollution those sugar producers do to our country, no matter how much they devastate the environment, they don't touch them at all. That's where they get their money from. Right? So they go to state by state, region by region, and they take on different projects. In fact, I heard Rand Paul say, he wants to cut the Defense Department, but not the 2 bases in Kentucky. See? Not the 2 bases in Kentucky. Everything else, and Iran's going to be a friend, but not the 2 bases in Kentucky, because that's where he's from. We're doing a different show. Let's start with, by the way, with the Department of Agriculture as we go through the show. Department of Agriculture and the farm subsidies, that really is what it's all about. It's let's look back for 1 second. The Department of Agriculture is about $156 billion a year. That's how much it takes to run that department. And so what do they spend our money on? Well, we've got food programs at $110 billion, farm programs at $30 billion, got the Forest Service at $6 billion. Generally speaking, the agricultural subsidies are about $30 billion. So you've got $30 billion in agricultural subsidies. And quite frankly, this goes back and forth, not a popular thing to say, even here in Colorado where I live, I suppose. As soon as you look on the news, as soon as a storm hits, as soon as fields get wiped out, people are looking for the federal government to come in. Today is the second anniversary of the first anniversary, I guess, of Sandy, Hurricane Sandy. And what did the governor of Jersey want? He wanted $61 billion of our money to go to New Jersey. This is a game that we just can't keep playing. In that case, it's really it's a tragedy, and we feel bad for it. But we've got to tell people we're not really going to build houses on the ocean anymore if that's what's going to keep happening. You can't take that risk and expect. And then again, you can't in New Jersey take that risk and expect the farmer in the Midwest to bail you out. You don't live it on the ocean. And believe me, not all those houses were ocean houses, and a lot were destroyed, and it's a terrible situation. But people have to have insurance for it, and people have to have their own crop insurance, and you can get that. So if we take $30 billion by zeroing out agricultural subsidies, one, and we take these food programs, which is really food stamps, is basically the Department of Agriculture runs the food stamp program. And we raise the requirements. We take $110 billion and make it $90 billion. I mean, that's a start. So this $50 billion, we could have $775 billion before we get through today. And you look at all these agriculture, and look at, for example, just recently, you may not have followed this story, but it's a big story around here because up in South Dakota, again, they had a disaster. They had like 3 feet of snow in South Dakota a couple of weeks ago. And the pictures of the cattle and the losses of the cattle, the devastating losses. And I have cattle. And I don't portray myself as a cattle rancher. I just have 10 head of cattle and unusual cattle. And I have a kind of a high margin, low volume cattle business here in Fort Collins. But I know people who have cattle, lots of cattle. And I know how bad sometimes they've struggled. In the last several years I've been here with the drought, and they couldn't get the price of hay went up. But that doesn't mean that we have to all the time bail people out. I mean, tragedies are going to happen. And what happened in South Dakota was simply like, as you read the paper about it and you saw the devastation. I mean, hundreds of cows just finding their way into a low spot and just drowning. They're dead. And, those cows might go for 2,000. Guy might have 200 head of cows, 300 head of cows. He might have lost 100. 100 times 1,000 times 2,000. He might have been wiped out. But if we keep doing this, and it's always about the politics of division, then we'll never get to this. We will never, ever get to anybody saying, no, it's about all of us. And the fact that we can't run these kind of deficits much longer. Because one line item in the budget that we're not going to talk about today directly, but one line item in the budget is the 200 and some odd billion dollars of interest payments. Now remember, we're going to take in like $3 trillion this year. And so let's say we're paying out interest costs over the next year on the $17 trillion, but we don't pay interest on all of it because some goes back and forth to the government. Let's just say it's, for sake of argument, it's $250 billion. The real thing that's going to happen to our country, and we don't know when, but we know it's going to happen at the rate we're going, whether it's George Bush, Barack Obama, it doesn't matter. At the rate we're going with the Republican Congress, the Democratic Congress, the Democratic Senate, who doesn't even produce a budget, the Republicans who pretend they're fiscal conservatives but don't do anything about cutting spending when they're in office the last 10 years, it's just going to go like this. And at some point, these rates that they've kept very, very low, and hopefully everybody who has a mortgage has refinanced by now because they don't seem to be going much lower. At some point, people are going to wake up and they're going to go a lot higher because the ability for us to pay this is going to be looking to people around the world, into our own citizens, something we don't want to do anymore. And rates will rise. I'll give you an example. This is the real danger of not doing this kind of stuff. The average borrowing cost of the United States of America the last 30 years is roughly 6%. Okay, 6%. Today we're borrowing at about 2%. What if we would just, I always think in terms of these business things. Let's go back to the average. When we're doing budgets, when I've done budgets in the private sector, in the public sector, in the private sector, I'm always taking a look back and saying, so what happened in the past? What were the tax collections rate of the city that I was the mayor of? What did they average? If they're lower now, how do we get them higher? But I'm not betting on higher. I'm betting on the average right now so I can run a surplus. So if we go back to 6% and we get to $20 trillion in debt, it's called 5%. Those numbers just ballooned. Let's say we're borrowing at 5%. So it's like $1 trillion in interest cost. I just told you we took in $3 trillion. Maybe by then we take it in 3.4. I don't know. It becomes a third of the budget, the interest cost. So to plan that we're not going back to average on our borrowing cost, that's a bad plan. That wouldn't be the plan your family would have for your income. Let's just say you had a great year. Let's say you sold an income property and you have a family that makes $100,000 and you have this great year. You sold the house, you made a $150,000 profit. You paid your long-term capital gains because it wasn't your primary residence. You got $100,000, let's say. Well, you don't plan on next year making that money unless you have 5 more rental houses that you're lining up for sale every year. So you don't change your living. You live based on the $100,000. Maybe you have a party, you take a trip with $100,000 after taxes. But in America today, we are not planning to return to the average. And that's why we have to balance the budget. And by the way, there's other shows to be done on the long-term debt. The long-term debt of our country, as far as the unfunded mandates that we have, the stuff that's on the books about Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid and so forth, and the way the spending is going up, is about $211 trillion. That's another show. This is just about taking a look at the programs that we have, like we just take a look at agriculture, and we discussed it. And what I just said is very politically unpopular, and almost nobody says it. Now, certainly a congressman from Manhattan probably says it, right? He's got no farms. He's got nothing going on in Manhattan. He's got some stuff on the roof, right? Couple of corn crops on the roof and a couple of his customers, but that's all he's got. So he'll say it. But by and large, the farm people are very strong. They don't want any cuts. But a vast majority now of these agricultural subsidies, they go to rich farmers. They go to big farmers. They don't go to the guy with 25 acres like me. And they shouldn't go to me anyway, but they don't go to people who have 30 acres. They don't go to people with 640 acres and a mule. They don't go to those people. They go to sometimes people who are doing farming on the side, but they're very wealthy and they get these subsidies. So $50 billion there has to go. And by the way, one thing to talk about the Department of Agriculture, it's been plagued with scandals after scandal after scandal, and there's not enough time in an hour to go through the scandals. You could go through the Florida sugar producers are one of the biggest scandals going on of all time. They destroy our environment. They get massive subsidies. They force companies to leave the country, to produce sugar producers, candy producers to leave the country. Back in 2003, there was a powdered milk scandal. Go look that one up. People weren't paying back their loans. All right, so that's $50 billion. Next one we should take a look at is the Department of Commerce. We won't spend a lot of time here, but the Department of Commerce spends about $10 billion. We got to cut that back 20%, let's say. Let's cut it back $2 billion. I mean, they do things like give dollars to fishermen, $100 million. They do something with the Broadband Opportunity Fund, for, what did I write down here? $900 million. They got Economic Development Administrations at $500 million. I mean, they've got things that I don't even know. I had time to go look up. What's the Broadband Opportunity Fund? Does anybody listening know? I mean, I'll go look it up later if we want. I'm not really enticed to do a show about it. The Department of Commerce, it's got to be reduced. This is the thing about it, by the way. This is the thing that I look at. When I'm looking at a financial problem like we have, I look at everybody's got to take some hit. Some more than others, richer more than poor, but everybody's going to take a hit. We live in a place where, hey, since September 11, 2001, when afterwards George Bush said, just go shopping. That wasn't the right message. The right message was to come back and say, we got a serious problem. It's going to cost us more money. We'll have to pay for it now. Instead, and by the way, I was with the president, not just me and him, but in a room about 65 people a couple weeks ago on a Monday night. And he didn't get it. I mean, he's a very engaging guy. It was lovely being with him. He's funny. But he really didn't get what had happened. He actually said at one point that the debt per GDP under his administration didn't go up. It did. It went from like 52 to 85%. And I think he was like, in his mind, not calculating the cost of the wars. Be like, I mean, I don't know what it'd be like. What do you mean you're not? What do you mean you're not going to cut? That's what he must have been counting. Because when I took out the cost of the wars, then the debt to GDP really didn't go up. Be like, oh, how much does it cost to raise a kid? I'm not including the college education. What? Not including the diapers. Why wouldn't you include diapers? What, you don't have diapers? They just go all over the floor? No, I included you include the diapers. So we include the wars. And we should have been paying for it. That should have been pay as you go. That should have been something we went back and said, we got this problem. If that's what we were going to do, convince people this is how we're going to do. Which brings us, by the way, to the Department of Defense. And it's a longer discussion for the Department of Defense. And I'm going to have to quicken it up because we're only going to have an hour. But the Department of Defense, here's the number one thing. And this is what, by the way, Mitt Romney, we'll play a clip of him later. But Mitt Romney, when he ran for president, he had a commercial that literally said, we're going to increase defense spending and take care of all the older people in America and not cut the entitlement programs, and we're going to balance the budget at the end. And I'm sitting there going, what? It's the bald-faced lies that people come up with. Now, forget the Democrats. They're not even going to talk about it. They don't care. They don't care about balancing the budget. But the Republicans are just pretending to balance the budget. So the Department of Defense, here's the way I kind of look at it. An inflation-adjusted dollar, simply meaning that we're taking what a dollar was worth back in 1985, 1986, and what it's worth today. We never spent, maybe a dollar more, but we never spent really more than $500 billion per year, adjusted for today's numbers, 2013 dollars, in defeating the Soviet Union, when there really was a giant buildup of ships. Now, part of the buildup in those ships and everything left us with a force that was ready to fight, which we've been using inappropriately over the last 2 decades, but that's another show. So today, this year, and I'm not talking about military veterans benefits. I'm just talking about military defense is about $633 billion this year. We can take $130 billion out of that. We have to. You can't balance the budget without it. And again, you can't balance the budget without everybody participating. And then, by the way, we have to have a strong military. I'm not one of these people who's like, oh, Iran's going to be our friends if we just kind of shake hands with them. No, we're in a religious battle with these people in many respects. No one talks about that way, but we are in the Middle East. And it's all about oil. And we've got to have all of our own energy. That's a whole way to save a lot of money on national defense. Billions, probably hundreds of billions over the years by having our own energy. But if we don't tell people with a straight face that, listen, even with China's military buildup, let's say they're at $125 billion this year, and we're at $500 billion. We should have a competitive advantage to them, right? Over them. And we got to stop China from building up its military, and we've got to fight it in a smart way. But that's $130 billion. So we've only been through 3 departments. I'll go through some quicker. We're about $200 billion into $750 billion. It's Steve Laffey's Fixing America. This is how we fix America. You know the problem. Like us on Facebook at Laffey Radio. Go to www.laffeyradio.com and forget the www. Just go to laffeyradio.com. But we're going to take a quick break, come back with a clip, and we're going to talk about that and about how we finish balancing the United States budget right here in 1 hour. Steve Laffey will be right back.
Stay tuned. Steve Laffey's Fixing America returns after these commercial messages. Is China the new superpower? And is American economic policy creating a monster in the East, housing almost 20% of the Earth's population and boasting a GDP growth rate close to 4 times that of the U.S.? China quietly ascends in economic power and military might. Join us tomorrow at 3 as Laffey breaks down the dangers of the meteoric rise of China's position in the world and how American consumers and businesses are paving the way. Only on Steve Laffey's Fixing America.
This year, firefighters like Fire Chief James Hall will battle wildfires around the country in hopes of containing them. But firefighters can't do it alone.
A single ember that escapes from a wildfire can travel more than a mile, or it can ignite and destroy your home and community.
Get fire adapted. Learn simple steps you can take now to reduce wildfire damage later at fireadapted.org. A public service message brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service and the Ad Council. Learn more at fireadapted.org.
I am an American soldier.
I'm a warrior and a member of a team.
I serve the people of the United States and live the Army values.
I will always place this first.
I will never accept defeat.
I will never accept defeat.
I will never quit.
I will never leave a fallen comrade.
I am disciplined.
I am disciplined.
Physically and mentally tough.
Trained and proficient in my warrior tasks and drills.
I'm an expert and I'm a professional.
I stand ready to deploy, engage, and destroy the
enemies of the United States of America in close combat.
I am a guardian of freedom and the American way of life.
I am an American soldier.
I am an American soldier.
I am an American soldier.
There's strong, and there's Army Strong. See what it takes at GoArmy.com.
This is Nnamdi Asamoah. I play football for the Philadelphia Eagles, but what I do off the field with United Way might be more important. I'm a volunteer tutor and mentor. Why? Because over 1 million kids a year drop out of school, and that's not okay. It takes 12 years to create a graduate, but it takes about the same time to create a dropout. And the difference between a child becoming one or the other could be me, or it could be you. Studies show that if we get to these kids earlier, their chances are better. And kids who read well by 3rd grade are more likely to graduate. So join me in United Way. Suit up and take the pledge. Become a volunteer reader, tutor, or mentor. Because when a child succeeds, we all succeed. Give, advocate, volunteer, live united. Take the pledge at unitedway.org. Brought to you by United Way, the Ad Council, and the National Football League.
And now, back to the Fixing America radio program with your host, Steve Laffey.
The American people, regardless of political affiliation, expect elected leaders in Washington to offer a plan to reduce mounting deficits and revive our stagnant economy. The Senate asked for higher taxes, to fund higher spending, to finance ever-growing government. My constituents are tired of the cavalier and unserious approach that has become all too common in Washington. I'm pleased that the House Republican majority continues to take its responsibility seriously and produce budgets which balance, getting us back on track to fiscal sanity and a healthy economy. I yield back.
Time has expired.
That's I was just my lip reading class I was doing for a second. That was actually Congressman Wahlberg out of Michigan, who actually ran in 2006 and then lost and won again. And that's him talking about his Republican cohorts who want to take responsibility for this budget deficit. They don't. I mean, I got it right. Hold on one second. I got it right over here. I mean, even their leader in the House. We're talking Steve Laffey here. Steve Laffey's Fixing America. LaffeyRadio.com. I'm just really into balancing this budget, and I really get annoyed when I hear stuff like that from Republicans, because it's a pretense. Go to Congressman Wahlberg's website tonight. He's not balancing the budget. He got no plan to balance the budget. He never has. But he's talking about it, and his Republican cohorts. And by the way, the Democrats have no plan. They don't want to balance the budget. We'll hear from the president later. But I have, and I'm probably the only person who read it, I have Congressman Ryan's budget. 10 years to balance the budget. It used to be till 2030. Now it's 2012 or 2013. But he uses growth rates that are far above what we've had in the past. You know, we've grown at 3.8%. He's got to go up at 5.7% as far as government revenue. So they're not serious about it. They haven't put forth a serious proposal. They haven't. The Republicans' House. We just cut $50 billion agricultural subsidies. We just took $2 billion out of the Department of Commerce. We just took $136 billion or so out of the Department of Defense. And we'll do a show about how we do that. And by the way, that one can't really be done overnight. You just can't do it overnight. You can do that it's going to take a couple of years. And then, by the way, maybe there are some, by the way, Governor, but as we go from department to department, talking about how we're going to balance the budget, we end up with the Department of Education. Background in the Department of Education, it's been around a while. It really took growth, and when Jimmy Carter came in office, it was one of the things he promised the teachers that he would do. And all I got to say about this, and listen, I don't know whether I'm conservative. Sometimes I'm a populist guy. People kind of characterize me when I run for office in different ways, but I know what works. And I got 6 kids. And let me tell you what works. Parents taking charge of their kids' education. I've had my kids in Montessori schools, public schools, private schools, Catholic schools. What's left? Homeschool. That's what we do now. I've got them in Colorado Early College, where I got an 18-year-old about to be a junior at college. I focus in on it. When we tell people you don't have to focus in on it, that the federal government's going to take care of your kids' education, it's been a disaster. What do we have? Test scores down. If the Department of Education was spending $47 billion a year and the test scores were the best in the world, and our math scores were beating Sweden, which they're not, I'd be like, oh, okay, I guess it works. I know. I've seen this. I've seen it with my kids. The embarrassment of being out of office and taking my kids for a month and grabbing some books and realizing my 3rd and 4th grader are being taught by someone basically with a sociology degree. They're being taught math by someone who doesn't know math, so they teach them about math, means that we've got to scrap this system. And all George Bush did was No Child Left Behind, which should have been vouchers to get kids out of these schools. Every time we get a kid out of one of these schools, we're doing better. And no more talking about, it'll leave the minorities behind or this or that behind. Every kid we get out, we save. The public school systems are in total disarray, especially in big cities, but even around here, even with school choice. So, but they can have their public schools. There's no business at all that the federal government has this. That's $47 billion, right? It's $47 billion gone. The governor of Texas and myself, and I can actually remember which one I'm going to eliminate, but the governor of Texas and myself, we're on to that. And a lot of people are. Reagan was on to this. But we have to explain to the American people in just those stark terms. I've got a lot of kids. I've seen it happen. It doesn't work. It didn't work. Why is it not okay to say this didn't work? We'll try something else. Let's try it from the bottoms up, not the top down. The top down didn't work. Our education system is in complete disarray. Our kids are falling behind. When you go to this junior college around the corner where I am, many of the people in there, they went out of high school. They should know this material. They're retaking it at Front Range Community College. They're retaking subjects maybe for the first time, maybe for the second time, that they should have never gotten out of high school not knowing. Basic English, basic math, trigonometry. That's not a college course. It's a high school course. Everybody can do it. We got to get them to do it. So I get emotional about this one because I've seen it. I've seen all the different school systems. You know, I happen to have a lot of kids, by the grace of God, and I love them, and I want the best for them. And by the way, poor parents do too. White parents, black, it doesn't matter the color of your skin. People want what's best for the children. That's why we're balancing the budget. It can no longer be the older people who are taking an extra $300,000 in Medicare, Medicaid, whatever it is, versus what they're putting in on average, hundreds of thousands of dollars, saying to the kids who are 20, 23, you're down $400,000. That's what we're leaving you with you. And we didn't have enough kids to even build it up. It can't be. This can't be. It's totally out of control. Says the Department of Education. By the way, I didn't even touch the Pell Grants. We can talk about Pell Grants some other time. They're $22 billion. Here's the Department of Energy. And by the way, it's one of these things where we say we should close the Department of Energy. It actually has like $10 billion of controlling all our nuclear plants and where the stuff goes. So we can save probably $20 billion. We can't save, we got to send the $10 billion over to the Department of Defense. Why the Department of Energy takes care of our nuclear? That's the Department of Defense job. So maybe we have to add $10 billion in there or whatever. But that's what we have to do. Department of Energy is one of those situations where we've got to end it. I mean, the people working in those buildings down in Florida, down in Washington. I mean, first of all, the Department of Energy should be about, if it was ever working, would be that we'd have low energy prices. Since it came around in the 70s, up, down, up. There's been no success. So it's got to go. Next, we have the Health and Human Services. And this is a big one. This is a giant one. And I was shocked. One of the reasons I was up at 2:30 this morning was that I noticed that a couple of years ago when I balanced the budget for the movie and did it in a slightly different way, for the movie Fixing America, and you can find that on Laffey Radio too if you want to watch the movie. You can watch me balance the budget there. But it's different now. I was kind of shocked that Health and Human Services, of course, which is Medicare, Medicaid, Head Start, Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, also called TANF, National Institute of Health, Children's Health Insurance. It's at $900 billion this year. It's growing astronomically. And again, the Republicans do nothing about it. Democrats, no one's even talking about it. We have Obamacare, which is a whole nother, not a whole other thing. It's the laws regarding some of this stuff. And it's putting a lot more people into Medicaid, I suppose, who are signing up. Well, our website works better than what's going on in Washington, I suppose. And we didn't spend $800 million on it. We spent good money on it. Looks good. Great job, boss. But we didn't spend $800 million on it. Maybe I'll get that contract. They got a guy in Canada with that contract. I'd like the contract. We'd do it for like $200 million, and it would work. And I wouldn't even touch it. I just get really good people to know what they're doing. That's my talent. Get really good people, know what they're doing, let them do their job. But we've got to say to these people, I'll give you an example. Let's go back to constant dollars. In 2000, not that long ago, 13 years ago, what did we spend on this department, Health and Human Services, Medicare, Medicaid, so forth? In constant dollars, we spent $500 billion. 13 years later, it's $900 billion. I lost my HP 12C calculator. I'm going to guess it's about 3 times the growth of inflation, maybe 4 times the growth of inflation over that time period. So in real dollars, it's swamping everything we're doing. So we've got to make some, and again, very hard choices. And I saved this over here. Hold on a second. I saved, and this comes from one of the think tanks, do very good work. But almost all the ones we can eliminate are these state grant programs. And I could list them for you. Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, $17 billion. Children's Health Insurance Program, $8 billion. Foster care grants. All this stuff comes out of the states, gets inappropriately managed, wasted, and sent back to the states. You have to let the states do that. And there's $81 billion. But every department, by the way, we're going through department by department, every department could be cut 10%. And we've got to change up our eligibility requirements for Medicaid and for Medicare. Now, Medicare, remember, is for older people over 65. That's $504 billion. And a lot of stuff is being used at the end of life. One of the things we're going to have to do, first of all, we got a program for older people, for poorer people. Now we got one for the young people who don't want to sign up. We've got all these different things going on in our country. We're going to have to change that, and we're going to have to limit how much money we're spending, the federal government is spending on health care to say, 10% of gross domestic product. Make up a number. And then we're going to have to tell people that in order to get more services, more things that you get for this, we got to grow the economy. So therefore, we're all in. If the economy grew at 5%, we'd have more money. That expenditure on healthcare would go. But if we can do what Sweden does, we can do what Switzerland does, we can do what these other countries do as far as how much we're spending, and we can do it better. So we've got to take an enormous amount of money out of Medicare, Medicaid, and these programs. I would say we just take another 10% out of the $504 billion of Medicare, the $200 billion of Medicaid at $700 billion. You got to cut it back 10%. Change the eligibilities. Change what happens at the end of life. We just can't have people be spending half the money in the last 2 weeks, whether it's me or you, because we got kids, or we got nieces, or we got nephews. We've got a future. And if it's really not about that, then you just turn off the show. If it's really not about, if I'm not really sitting here, because it's not about my 6 kids and your kids, and if you don't have kids, about your nieces and nephews, or just the fact that it's a great country and people left it better for us, right? That we got to leave it better for them. It's not about that. Just take what you want and watch the World Series. Then this show isn't for you. But that's what's got to be explained to people. That all of this, I'm cutting everything. I'm cutting everything I can find. And we've got some clips here. We got some clips. I wanted to play one of these clips. Play a clip if you would. Clip one. It's Barack Obama talking to George Stephanopoulos, who I've been on his show. And just get a flavor here as we go from topic to topic and budget to budget, a line item, about how little people really do focus in on it at the very top level. Please, boss, play clip one.
Ryan today put forward his budget, and he says he's challenging you to come forward with a budget that also reaches balance. Are you going to do that?
No, I think that there is a possibility. Look, balancing the budget in part depends on how fast you grow. You remember, you were in the Clinton administration. The reason that you guys balanced it was a combination of some tax hikes, some spending cuts, and the economy grew. And so, my goal is not to chase a balanced budget just for the sake of balance. My goal is how do we grow the economy, put people back to work, and if we do that, we're going to be bringing in more revenue. If we've controlled spending and we've got a smart entitlement package, then potentially what you have is balance, but it's not balance on the backs of the poor, the elderly, students who need student loans, families who've got disabled kids. That's not the right way to balance our budget.
So the initial answer from the president is simply no. If you caught that, he says no. And by the way, he says Ryan has a plan to balance the budget. It's over there. It's not going to balance the budget. So Stephanopoulos is using a data that he didn't understand and didn't read the documents, isn't trained to look back and get out a calculator and figure out what the real growth rates are going to be, or change them and make it on some real assumptions. And he asked the president simply says no. And then the president goes into how this could happen potentially, and he's just not concerned with it. But he's not going to balance it on the backs of, again, the same Democratic mantra the Republicans have theirs, the Democrats have theirs, the Republicans have the National Defense Department. They think because we have a big Defense Department, we're safer. No, we're only safer if we protect the United States of America, the citizens of America, from being attacked. If we can do it for less, we do it for less. If we have to explain to the American people we do it for more because there really is a real war, then we got to explain it to them. But we've got to do a much better job. But he's just not going to do it. He's not going to do it, and that represents most of all of our elected officials. It's not like people contradict them and there's a big uprising in the Democratic Party or among elected officials in Washington. They don't want to do it. Here we are just taking what? $150 billion out of that's what has to happen. And by the way, balancing the budget, we're not backing into balancing the budget. Balancing the budget is something we have to do all the time. So then we look at housing and urban development, another scandal-ridden department that never makes the news. Back in the 80s on real dollars, we spent about $35 billion on it. Today it's $60 billion. They do things like rental assistance, housing financing, and housing finance, of course, one of the things that contributed to your housing price going down. Because we got to have people put down 20% for the homes. Not everybody has to own a home. The American dream isn't about buying a home. The American dream isn't about getting rich. The American dream is about being all you can be, doing what you want to do. Encouraging everybody to own a home who may not want to or be able to has led to a real disaster. Anyway, we're not quite there, and we've got a couple of clips. I'm going to have to talk real fast, even though I talk fast, to get through the show. But it's Steve Laffey here. Steve Laffey's Fixing America. Like us on Facebook. Go there now. We're Laffey Radio on Facebook. We've got a brand new show, a brand new format. You can tell this is a new format. This doesn't really exist. On Twitter, follow us. We're putting out some good tweets. I'm not much of a Twitter, but we're putting out some. And we got these great videos you've got to send around to people so they can understand. And we are going to fix America. And we'll be back in 2 or 3 minutes. Steve Laffey's Fixing America will be back.
Stay tuned. Stay tuned. Steve Laffey's Fixing America returns after these commercial messages.
No one is better suited and more prepared to guard America in the century ahead than the U.S. Air Force. Above all, we defend America. Above all, we defend freedom. Above all, we are warriors who dominate air, space, and cyberspace. Above all, we are brothers and sisters who proudly stand together. Above all, we ensure victory before the battle even begins. Above all, there is nothing our friends respect more and our enemies fear more than the power of the U.S. Air Force. Above all, we stand ready as the decisive force for the 21st century. Above all, we are the U.S. Air Force.
Jesse!
Let's go, guys!
Hey, did you guys know that kids who play sports earn more money when they grow up?
Of course. I knew that.
Hey, did you guys know that kids who read books have a bigger vocabulary?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Wow, Jinx. Did you guys know that friendly children have more friends?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
That's true. I knew that. Did you guys know that winter babies are better at music?
Everyone knows that.
Oh, yeah?
Pretty obvious.
Yeah,
so obvious.
Oh, hey, guys, did you know that most people think they're using the right car seat for their kid, but they're not?
Huh, I didn't know that.
I'm pretty sure I knew that.
I'm pretty sure you didn't.
Parents who really know it all know for sure that their child is in the right car seat at the right age and size. Visit safercar.gov/the right seat to make sure your child is protected. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Driving has a rhythm all its own. Don't wreck it with a text. Before you get behind the wheel, silence your phone. Or better yet, designate a texter. For more text-free driving.
Is China the new superpower? And is American economic policy creating a monster in the East, housing almost 20% of the Earth's population and boasting a GDP growth rate close to 4 times that of the U.S.? China quietly ascends in economic power and military might. Join us tomorrow at 3 as Laffey breaks down the dangers of the meteoric rise of China's position in the world and how American consumers and businesses are paving the way. Only on Steve Laffey's Fixing America. And now, back to the Fixing America radio program with your host, Steve Laffey.
Meanwhile, in the House, they're saying, well, we could be flexible on some of our demands if we could get a balanced budget amendment. And they note that Vice President Biden voted for a BBA in 1997. Is there any way that could be part of a solution? Is there any version of a BBA that you would support?
We don't need a constitutional amendment to do our jobs. The Constitution already tells us to do our jobs and to make sure that the government is living within its means and making responsible choices. And so this notion that we're going to go through a multi-year process instead of seizing the moment now and taking care of our problems is a typical Washington response.
Well, I don't know. I don't know what to say. He doesn't. We do need a balanced budget amendment, obviously, because our elected officials simply won't do it. They won't do it. And for the president to say that we're living within our means, well, obviously not. We just went through the fact that how could even someone say that? And how could a reporter even not just double over and laugh to any of these people? What do you mean? The follow-up question is, what do you mean? There's been $1 trillion deficits for 3-4 straight years. Bush ran up, from 5 to 8 to 10 or whatever. You're taking us to $20 trillion. We're not living within our means. Just say we're not living within our means. But that doesn't mean, by the way, that it's only Democrats. I like to play the Wolf Blitzer clip, boss, if we would. Clip 3. We've got Republican operative guy, I think he ran the National Republican Party, Ed Gillespie. You know, he just doesn't know the right questions that are going to be asked yet on this show. So listen to Wolf. And it's just an incredible clip where he really doesn't know what's going on in the Romney budget and doesn't know anything about balancing the budget. But I tell you, we'll skip. I think we'll skip. You want to play that clip? Yeah.
How many years would it take for the Romney budget to result in a balanced budget?
Wolf, I'm not sure of that myself, actually. I'll get that to you, though.
How can you not be sure?
I'm sure it's on our website. I should know it. I'm embarrassed on your air that I don't have that number at the top of my head. I didn't know we were going to talk about that today. I apologize for it.
All right, we'll get the number. We'll tell our viewers.
I didn't know you were going to ask.
No, budget deficits and balanced budgets, national debt, obviously a very important issue.
Okay. And Wolf Blitzer, the hardest working man in radio, TV, I guess, he knows. I guess he assumes. Well, the other guy, Gillespie, he's assuming he's going to be hand-fed the questions, but to not even know anything about the national debt or deficit, he doesn't know. And by the way, there was never a problem. I'm sure there wasn't a show afterwards. But it's Steve Laffey here. Steve Laffey's Fixing America. LaffeyRadio.com, of course, and on Laffey Radio on Twitter and Laffey Radio on Facebook. And we're nearly balanced the budget, and we're going to run out of time if I don't get to it. So we stopped last time with the Housing and Urban Development Department, and we look at now the Department of Interior. There's not much to say about that. Actually, we pay for a lot of it. It's like $18 billion outflow, but we take in about $8 billion and go into the national parks and so forth. Probably we can take $1 billion out of it. But then you get to the Department of Labor. It's a $95 billion department. You know, we're going to have to take money out of that. One of the things that happens with that, of course, is unemployment insurance. And, you know, they extended unemployment insurance. Many of the states are broke over unemployment insurance. And this is not a Republican thing. When we extended unemployment insurance for up to, say, 2 years at one point, they did it twice. Everybody knew that, every economist knew that the unemployment rate would stay relatively high. But all the politicians, and I mean Republicans and Democrats, were really focused in this would be a great political thing to do. It was a lousy economic thing to do. Generally speaking, people won't make economic decisions until they have to. If you've lost your job and you've got to move to another state, and you can get unemployment benefits, you're going to wait to the very end of those unemployment benefits to make the decision. Now, listen, unemployment, we could change the way this is run, but we've got to take about $20 billion out of that programming just to balance the budget. We've got to take about 20% out of that program and get it down to where, to a situation where we're spending a lot less money. And it's not Republicans that talk about this unemployment. Listen to Larry Summers. Larry Summers is Democrat as you get. He was Barack Obama's right-hand guy, left-hand guy, I guess you'd say. He was almost appointed to the Fed, but the Democrats really didn't like him because of what I guess he did at Harvard, some comments that he made. And he's a boisterous guy. Here he is talking about unemployment. To fully understand, says Larry Summers, unemployment, we must consider the causes of recorded long-term unemployment. Empirical evidence shows that two causes are welfare payments and unemployment insurance. This is Larry Summers. Empirical evidence shows that the two causes of relatively high unemployment are welfare payments and unemployment insurance. And he goes on. These government assistance programs contribute to long-term unemployment in two ways. First, government assistance increases the measure of unemployment by prompting people who are not working to claim that they are looking for work even when they are not. That happens all the time, by the way, all these states, and maybe not all of them, but where I'm from, and no one even asks you if you're looking for a job. The second way government assistance programs contribute to long-term unemployment is providing an incentive and the means not to work. It goes on. But that's what he's saying. He's not the right-wing Milton Friedman economist. That's Larry Summers. They all know it. They all do it. We've got to cut back. It will lower our unemployment rate. It will force people to take other jobs. And when you're unemployed long-term, it's harder to get back into the workforce, which brings us to, Social Security. Social Security, and again, that's why I had to redo the numbers. It's now an $873 billion number. Remember, we take in $3 trillion. We're spending $3.75 trillion this year. So deficits are coming down, but there's still $750 billion, as high as it's ever been before we went to higher than we've ever been before we went to the financial collapse of 2008. So we've got, the checks that go out to older people, OASI it's called, is $668 billion. That's for 47 million people. Get this. Disability insurance. It's $144 billion. It goes to 11 million people. The fraud that's going on in disability insurance is people can't find jobs, find a way to say, I'm totally disabled. People pass it off, and then people working for cash. That number is outrageous. We cannot have, just to go back, in 1990, there were 4.3 million on disability insurance. There's 11 million people today. And by the way, this kind of goes back to what I used to tell the firemen in Cranston about how many we had too many firemen by a factor of 2. I would say, let me ask you a question. Why do we need more firemen? The city's the same size. Building products are safer. Fires are less. The wood gets treated. People know more about fires. There's less wood burning stoves, et cetera, et cetera. There are less fires. It's only a couple in the city a year. Why do we need more? Same thing here. People are not engaged as much as they used to be in strenuous, back-breaking jobs who are American citizens. It's just not. People are sitting here like this much of the time. So it shouldn't be going up. It should be going down, but it's going up. And so there's where we got to get some money out of. So Social Security is going to have to be cut back by like $87 billion or 10%. And a lot of it's going to come out of that disability. That has to be tightened up. We've also got wasteful spending. Well, we get the Department of Transportation. So the Department of Transportation is $80 billion, and we're going to run out of time to talk about that too much. But we got to take $20 billion out of that. And then we go to Senator Coburn, who had a report commissioned. This is a little while ago, but it's worse today. I got an article about it. Billions in bloat uncovered in Beltway. They basically found about $200 billion of either duplicative services, waste, and so forth that we could just cut. This is not like cutting people's benefits. This is just stuff that we do. You got the food safety system, realign the military medical command, streamlining 31 agencies that provide for urgent soldiers' needs. There's 31 agencies that do that. We need one. Duplicate federal effort to provide water to the Mexican border region. It just goes on and on. So here's what I usually do. I don't say we're going to get $200 billion in savings out of that. We never will, not working with the federal government. But we can get 100. We can get $100 billion in savings out of that. And then it brings me to my favorite one, which is foreign aid. What I do with foreign aid here, I got an article about it. Foreign aid is about $23 billion in true foreign aid and probably another $14 billion in what we call military assistance. We've got to cut that out. It hasn't worked. Another thing that you can look at and say, let's look at Haiti, the earthquake that happened down there. Go look at the pictures today and the pictures that were several years ago when it happened. It's like the same. We sent all kinds of money there. We sent all kinds of money to Africa. Now, if the private sector wants to do that's great. But we've got people in cities all over this country that need to have. They're our citizens, and our citizens come first. So we're going to have to cut that out. Now, the military assistance stuff, let's leave that alone for a while. But we've got to demand people to do with the military assistance what we think they're going to do. If in Egypt, for example, we're giving them military assistance, a lot of it, and they're not taking care of this Islamic extremist problem, the new people who took out Morsi, the military, we've got to have some way of making sure that they are. Otherwise, it's just another total waste. Let Saudi Arabia send the stuff to them if they want. So there we are. A couple minutes to go. We're just taking $540 billion out, and it leaves us with sort of the last thing that we have to do. We've got to raise revenue. The thought process, and I don't talk about it in raising taxes and so forth, because the tax system won't produce any more money. The tax system is broken. And we can do a show when I can read out of the tax system, and people back there you'd be doubled over in laughter or doubled over in tears, or you just be doubled over because you fell asleep. But when you pull out the tax system, it looks like this in the small print version, and you really can't even pick it up. It's not going to do us any good. So we've got to go to a fair tax or flat tax. We can argue about it. We can take a vote on it. And what we got to do is actually tell people we're so far behind. We've got to find a way through a pre-bait decision, a situation in the fair tax where we take care of the poor people. We've got to find a way that we do this. And so that's where we got to get another $200 billion out. There's $750 billion. I know I had to cut it short at the end. We'll come back and do some more shows on this. But it's Steve Laffey here. We've been balancing the budget. That's $750 billion. It can be done. We will do it here in Fixing America on the Laffey Radio. And Steve Laffey, we will do these things. We need your help. We need you to listen. We'll be back tomorrow with another show. And we'll be fixing China. God bless.
You've been listening to Steve Laffey's Fixing America radio program on the Laffey Radio Network. Fixing America is broadcast Monday through Friday afternoons at 3 p.m. right here at www.laffeyradio.com. Any rebroadcast, retransmission, or account of this broadcast without the express written consent of Laffey Network, LLC is prohibited.